Hey, welcome everyone. I'm very pleased to this evening be able to welcome Anupama Kundoo to GSAPP for a lecture. We're very pleased that you are also here on a very short trip from very far away. So to just give a brief few introductory notes, Anupama was born in Pune, India. She graduated from Sir J.J. College of Architecture, University of Mumbai in 1989 and received her PhD degree from the TU Berlin in 2008. In 2013, she received an honorable mention in the ArcVision International Prize for Women in Architecture for her, I'll quote this, dedication when approaching the problem of affordability of construction and sustainability in all aspects. Her latest installation, Building Knowledge, an inventory of strategies, was recently exhibited at the 15th Architecture Biennale. I think actually it's just closing now, right? Next week. Next week. So you still have one more week to go. Anupama Kundoo's internationally recognized and award-winning architecture practice actually started in 1990, 26 years ago, and it demonstrates a strong focus on material research and experimentation towards an architecture that has a low environmental impact and is appropriate in the socio-economic context. She has built extensively in India and has had the experience of working, researching, and teaching in a variety of cultural contexts across the world. TU Berlin, the AAA School of Architecture in London, Parsons New School of Design in New York, the University of Queensland Brisbane, IUAV in Venice, ETSAB in Barcelona, and currently I believe you're a professor at UCJC in Madrid, where you are the chair of Affordable Habitat. You're also the Strauch Visiting Critic at Cornell University. That's old. Sorry about that. It's been, just to quote something that you said that I thought was interesting, is that on your own career, that it's been about building knowledge in both its meanings. One being the focus on knowledge about buildings and context appropriateness, and on the other where building is meant as a verb. And each architectural project is seen in the opportunity to advance those forms of knowledge amongst those of us who are involved, but also amongst those other experts from related fields, including craftsmen who produce buildings, as well as others who are affected by them directly or indirectly. I've heard you many times say that you have one foot in practice and another in academia, and that each area of your engagement has enriched the other. And so you have a research-oriented practice and a practice-oriented teaching approach. Lastly, I'd just like to say that you made a note also that you have become well known for these socio-economic sustainable projects, but you've also been doing many projects that we might consider more kind of in the mainstream rather than sort of just alternative practice. And I hope that we'll see many of those this evening. Thank you. Welcome, Anupama.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank all of you for inviting me here. It's a real pleasure to be here in New York and share my process with you, especially because I was invited to share what I've put up in Venice. I want to say that actually that is better shared in an academic environment. There's too much there in that installation. So I've you know, in the busy rush of things in the Venice Biennale, people are not going to be able to actually get all of it. But since it was the 25th year of my practice, I decided to put all of that together and organize all the work I've done so far. And so I took it as an academic project, this being the last week that it's still ongoing, you know, the exhibition is still open to people. I'm very happy to actually explain it, and I've organized this presentation, you know, along the lines of the installation that I put up. In continuation with what Lisa explained about how I intend to what I intend to express with the word building knowledge, both its meanings. I would like to say that that we are at crossroads. Everybody's talking about environmental crisis, social segregation, and all of these things. And the fact that nobody anywhere in the world, whether it's in New York, whether it's in Madrid, whether it's Bombay, people can't afford housing. Most of the whole salary almost goes into the rent of a place. And so we are going to have to really reinvent everything, I think, because we are running out of resources. The way we build doesn't work anymore. I mean, there's a lot to be unlearned. There's a lot to be, proposed. So this was already the scenario 26 years ago when I graduated. So right at that time, I had thought that I needed more time to develop knowledge as I go along. And that's why I initially had this title. But right now, I'm at a place where I like to use architecture as an instrument to build knowledge in places and bring these diverse people together who are not talking to each other, between architects, contractors, engineers, and so on. So yeah, with this background, I would like to just set up the key concerns that inform my practice and my research by mentioning a couple of, with each image, one of the global scenarios that call for a different way of building. This slide represents to me the bulk of India, an agricultural society, even though it's rapidly transforming. This is also how the planet is moving from rural to urban very rapidly. The people who are changing their living conditions from rural areas to urban areas are not able to change their mindset as fast as their physical conditions change. So this is, I'm just listing the concerns, and then I'll take you through the response, my architectural response to that. The other is this picture. This picture is really old, so today it would be much more crowded. This is Bombay. This is where this image is at least 10 years old, so I don't know how it looks like now. 1/6 of the planet lives in India. Like 1/6 of the population is located in India on a land that is only 2.4% of the global, land area. So the resources, although India is very richly endowed with resources, obviously the cake has to be cut in much thinner slices. So I think even if other people call something sustainable, it's not automatically sustainable for India because we have many more mouths to feed. This is one of the concerns. Then there's also this globalization trend that's calling for global standards of buildings. This is what's happening in Gurgaon, in the outskirts of Delhi. You see that the kind of things that are being promised, as a symbol of 21st century. But you see the ground, it's got pigs and cows, and you can realize immediately that it's a village in which there's, there's this kind of an aspiration that's being also promoted because there are a lot of international manufacturers and companies that have got global offices, and in order to station people there, they have to give them the same standard of centrally air-conditioned buildings and so on. The ground reality is different. We don't even have enough power to run all those new malls and things that they've created. There's not enough water to supply. A lot of new development is not ready for occupation because the municipality is not able to deliver the basic infrastructure. So this is a very good example because you see three skylines here. You see the naturally slow-growing, not slow, I shouldn't say slow, the organically growing development in that along that main road that goes on the highway outskirts of Delhi. So you see that, let me just see how does one, I forgot. Never mind. Oh yeah, there. You see there's this skyline, and then there are all these kind of glitzy towers and high-rise buildings that are proposed through a new joint private-public partnership. And in order to build all that, you see the front skyline, these slums, you know, these are the people who've migrated from villages to be able to serve as unskilled labor in order to build those buildings. So nobody has thought about their housing. And, you know, people are not realizing that if you do this, you're going to have this. And people are still not realizing that the economy does not take, the cost of those apartments do not consider whether these people have toilets when they work and all the rest, all the basics. So this is one of the concerns I have. And the other is that Bombay, the Bombay I grew up in and graduated from, did not have this much of, you know, social segregation, although it's hard to measure this as a citizen of that place. You live there, you become numb to those realities. You don't see, you know, lots of people are living in slums. You don't measure it, so you can't say whether it's grown or not. But of course, as an academic today, knowing all of those figures, I can say it's much worse. But what is also, you know, palpable is that a lot of areas have a much starker differentiation in the urban form. You could not see, you know, the high rises growing and the slums spreading. This sort of a thing is happening everywhere. It's happening all over South America, all over Africa. So social segregation is a huge concern for me. And in Bombay, more than 50% are slum dwellers and pavement dwellers, more than 50%. That means the people who live in normal houses are the minority. So the fact is the world is increasingly getting that way. If you look at the urban age reports and city comparisons, this is happening everywhere. So these are this cover most of my concerns, and the final one being the materials used to construct buildings. Even in India, although cement and steel are not considered the highest energy, embodied energy contributors, this is still true for India because there's not enough cement and steel to cater to all its demands. And it's become a vernacular material everywhere. But elsewhere, that people are using much more energy in the actual embodied energy contained in the buildings. In the developed countries, people are worried about the energy consumed to run buildings. They're not talking about this because in the pie chart, it looks like a small thing. But that's only because they use a lot more energy to run their buildings. It's not that they use less to build their buildings. It's just as they cut their energy, you know, as it gets more efficient, that piece is going to grow and reveal itself. So it's very important to look at it already in advance. In India, we, as I said, we have replaced all our rich tradition of building, all our building skills and everything with this kind of what is now a vernacular material, reinforced cement concrete. Nothing against that, but when people don't have the knowledge to build with reinforced concrete, usually they are badly made and they're very hard to fix. And on top of it, it has to be used judiciously. You can't make every single park bench in reinforced concrete when you know there's not enough to go around. People in big cities get them immediately, but in the rest of India and smaller cities, you have to wait for long for the steel to appear and so on. So when I moved out of Bombay and I went to Oroville, it was a remote area and I automatically began to question materials. So what I'm going to show today in connection with what I've shown at the Venice Biennale is all the research I've done with building materials categorized into broad sections. So I'm just taking you section by section. This one, the first table, I had arranged these tables with research, with material samples and so on. It's about live materials. Things I've done with wood, bamboo, thatch, everything that comes from trees, things that grow from the earth. So in contrast, you know, to all the life I had in Bombay, When I left it, I moved to Oroville and immediately started living like this. So it was, first of all, I was dealing with my own affordability issue on one hand, but on the other hand, I didn't know how long I would stay, and I thought that such a house, which can be built in a week, could stay at least for 2 years, and I would be able to afford that. So I also was interested in round wood as opposed to timber, because I mean, the section of wood that if you cut the thinnings of, from a forest and you try to build with the whole wood that you've cut, and it tapers, and then there are areas that are thinner and the sections that are bigger. If you use that, then you can use a very young tree, a 2 or 3 year old tree. Whereas if you cut it out, the same section out of a rectangle, as a rectangle, then you need a much bigger piece. You need the tree to grow. So this is a very basic sense I had, that if we are going to be able to grow this resource and consume in that proportion, we'll have to research round wood structures. So this was my first house. I lived here with a single solar panel, and I had a light bulb and a long cable, and I took the same bulb to various places so that I could have music as well. So it was a direct understanding of building and building infrastructure, and trying to live as simply as possible, not only changing the demand side, not only changing the supply side, but also the demand, working both ways and achieving a good life with very little resources. This experience actually taught me a lot and encouraged me to go on. So I must share this, because this was my own house, and as I simplified my life, I only felt better and better. And I realized actually that a lot of things you have are not necessary. And then you have to, if you want to build with significantly less, you really need to know. So that's why I put all my attention on knowledge and the building of knowledge. Because if you don't know engineering and you over-design everything like you see all around, that's the first area we can save a lot. Is because if you have knowledge, you can use significantly less materials. So this house has many, it is not only made with casuarina wood. There's a kind of palm, something between palm and bamboo called pakamaram. It's a very local thing with which the floor is made. It's tied with rope which comes from the coconut. All of these are live materials. They've all grown. There's the leaves are coconut. The ground floor was very simple like that. Later, I did a lot of things with, I was exploring. There's a whole study I did called Form Follows Technology, where I was looking at how technologies enable what kind of forms, and what's the relationship between material choices, construction technologies, and engineering. So I did a few things like this at environmentally sensitive locations where you can dismantle everything and leave nothing, like no trace of the fact that you had used this place to live. This was for a yoga center at Mulshi. This is, the team of people who work with these materials traditionally. I have to say that all the things I'm going to show are actually not traditional. I mean, there are traditional skills, and sometimes skills have been, learned in the process. So it can be easily confused with vernacular architecture. But in this case, it is much more vernacular, because I had just got there, and there were people building and living in these houses. I just designed it for my contemporary needs. But much later, I have taken students from the AA here to have this kind of full-scale experience, because I believe that in academia, what I find missing is that people are disconnected from the reality. And I think there's no need for academia, and I don't know why people accept that it's a given. I just don't get it, because I really think that it's very important to be able to contribute back to life. You must never lose contact with it. And so I think that in design studios that I find the way it's being taught mostly everywhere, is that people don't have the experience or contact to real materials, real scale, which I find very, very dangerous if people don't know how to visualize and only know what works in models, and then to real people and to real places. And I think I try to bring this opportunity in the design studio because I want them to confront these realities, be informed by those realities in the design and process, and keep feeding this experiences that they have, the real learning experiences, not just learning, but learning experience, experiencing knowledge and imbibing it, and then drawing out of that. So this was an example for a watchtower in a botanical garden. So in 10 days, it was possible to design. It was a design competition, 12 students, 12 designs made directly through models, and then choosing one, building it together. And I always, have this sort of a scenario in my projects or in my teaching where there are students, there are professionals, there are artisans, there are, everyone, engineers, everyone who needs to be there are there together, and there are no walls between them. So I find that that is interesting for everyone to go further with what they know. So this is what those students produced with people who had no hands-on experience with building, but with the support of craftsmen, and just in as few days as 10 days, a lot of building in full scale is possible. The second, I meant to have a divider here to go to the next section of fired clay. No, this has come out of place. Sorry, I'm confused. So here you see the similar kind of materials entering some other type of houses, but continuing with a kind of hybrid kind of thing, because a lot of people start wanting to have this kind of house, having contact to nature, but not ready to go all the way. So, there are some kind of applications. But here again, you see that the coconut thatch is not attached on wood. It's attached, it's supported by GI wires. So there's a kind of introduction of something a little more high-tech, because that's what makes sense in that project. And the whole thing is supported more lightly. Next series of explorations involve earth. It covers fired earth, terracotta, rammed earth, baked in situ mud houses. So one of the things I started researching is when people make bricks in factories versus when people make bricks in a kind of in the countryside. The high quality brick versus the what we call floor molded, not table molded. They are not level. They are all made on the field and so on. So ever since Louis Kahn came to India and built all those amazing buildings, we have been always chasing, and that from all our schools, we are always chasing the proper brick. We want to find the industrial brick. Now it's the industrial brick which actually is considered, not so environmental friendly. It consumes a lot of energy. It needs to be, coal needs to be burnt, etc. So people in the green rating systems, they don't have anything to do with the quality of energy. They just consider the quantity of energy. That was bothering me. And so bricks were considered like the bad material. But I found out that actually they mean the industrial brick, because the local brick is actually part of the landscape of the territory of how things are made, what kind of clay is available. It's, they are weak, I realized, and the more I found out, the more I started realizing that the bad brick is the good brick actually, because the bricks that are made in this way, just like they were made in Mohenjo-daro and Harappa 3,800 years ago, those are made very, very locally, and they may not reach that kind of strength, but it's possible to use it for a lot of things. So, that was my first encounter with brick, and I realized in the way these bricks are made, not factory-made bricks, I mean local ovens. These are also, the things with which they cook those bricks are also part of the cycle of what they grow. So the casuarina with which I built my house is the same that you see here. These come out of plantations that are grown where the thinnings are used as fuel. And this is part of an activity which is interspersed within the agricultural cycle and so on. So I realized by being more sensitive to the territorial activities that it's not good to displace everything overnight. So I started researching lime kilns, brick kilns and all of that, and realized that, just because you come out of school, you just specify Portland cement, because that's what we are taught, because that's a standard thing. And there, again, we need to know less, because everything is standard. You don't need to know, the clay won't differ, the lime won't differ. It's easy, standardized. So we just don't realize that all of these people and their activity is displaced too easily. So I did this house, when I moved out of that hut I showed you, I made this house by reviving that type of brick. Actually, this brick is not the same size as the one I showed before. It's like the Roman bricks that are still made in Tamil Nadu. There were different sizes still available. There were, in the bullock cart radius, you could get all sorts of brick sizes. According to, you could hold it easily in your hand. It's not heavy. It allowed for fine work. It's about 1 inch thick, these bricks. So I wanted to put it out exposed, even though it's a very tropical kind of area. So this house was made mostly with that brick, even the roof, the floor, I mean here. This is the wall house. And then I've used these bricks in several other houses. So, the houses are contemporary, but the thinking and the material, the processes involved are more sensitive. Because usually there's this notion that if you do things in the old way, I want to really have a discussion one day about what is vernacular, really. Because, there's easily people call, now if they see certain images, they'll call it contemporary and some others will be vernacular, So there's a lot of ideas to be dismantled there. But anyway, mostly in these houses, there's a lot of this natural, the way the outside comes in and so on. But I'm just showing some of the architecture that has been built with these kind of materials. This is a very low-cost library in Pondicherry that we are just about finishing right now. The good thing about brick is that it can be left without plaster and paint. So all those materials can be redundant, because if fungus is going to grow anyway, it better grow on the brick than on the white painted walls, because it's much more visible, and people can't afford to maintain their buildings and paint them each year. So here I'm moving on to terracotta, where it's basically the same material, fired clay. And in the first house that I did, my very first project for a Frenchman, I was already living in that hut, and I realized that when I would visit friends in their proper pakka houses, I realized that actually those houses, those concrete roofs, actually made the house much more uncomfortable than my own thatch hut. So I already started thinking about, I thought I have to have some alternative roof. I can't be contributing to building and creating more problems than there were when you didn't have the house. So I came to this choice because I had seen a lot of potters in that region who try to sell pots habitually and hardly find buyers. So I knew that those skills were available, and I tried to find a way to build roofing systems that would require hardly any steel at all. Because, as I said, in a rural area, we had to wait for a long time for the steel to arrive, and it would delay the construction. So at that time, it was not so much of a low-cost quest. It was more about, you know, building with what is locally available. And in order to communicate with the craftsmen and all of that, I was already working in one-to-one so that they would understand what was going on and be able to help me, because I was nervous as it was my first project. So you can see, like I didn't know a lot of things, and I realized that actually you don't have to know something in order to do it. I mean, you can't wait till you know it. If you don't start doing it, you'll never find out in the process. So I felt like it's important, if you're curious about something, you have to embark on a project with it, and that's the only way you will get the answers in the process. So I already began with the first project trying to give this kind of a roof, working with the craftspeople, and realizing in the process that the way they produce these terracotta, you know, elements with local bio-waste and so on, with the help of Ray Meeker, a Californian ceramist who was there locally, I managed to get much better strength and much more of a finesse and a standard, element with the same people, because we made very invisible changes in the design. This was designed and made. It's not a locally existing way of making roofs. We just diverted the skills they had towards buildings, because their products would land up only in the museum otherwise. So with this, like here you see coconut shells, etc., are used for firing these pots. So the first house that I did, and that's what came out of the Frenchman's house, this is the architecture that I produced with that, with ferrocement fins, insulated walls and roofs. It looked, I'd still come straight from Bombay, and I had this kind of aesthetic sense, and that's what I did. And at that time, people said that it had a Bauhaus influence and whatever, And immediately when I did the next house, where all I did was remove the plaster because of that fungus problem, immediately they called it vernacular. And that's why I'm mentioning this, because I think people are rapidly jumping to conclusions about materials and, feeding their own, the stereotypical ideas about these things. So anyway, this was quite a big project for me, and the only thing I'd asked the client to agree to was the roof, and I said, I'll compromise anywhere, let me just do this roof. So you see the roof again repeated 10 years later in my own house. So in this space, you can see that, it's very durable. The first house that I've done is 25 years old already. So it's tried and tested. And I went on to thinking about other systems that you can see there in the left-hand corner of how terracotta could work as loss shuttering and resolve these RCC roofs and make them more efficient. So this is the quality of the house. The bedroom that sticks out of the wall. And I was very happy to find out that when I had to do a very low-cost housing project with very, very, very little, like it cost $3,000 per house, I found out that this roof was still the cheapest thing as well. So the concern for affordability came a bit later on for me. It was mostly about affordability in environmental terms before in economic terms. So, so you find actually a lot of people using these techniques now also in that area. And this is the other roof I'm going to cover here. See, people in small towns cannot afford formwork and good quality shuttering to make their concrete smooth enough not to require plaster, just to hide the flaws. On the other hand, all efficient RCC constructions overuse flat slabs, etc., over-design them, because formwork is very expensive. So if you were to do diagrid slabs, waffle slabs, and so on, people hesitate to introduce those kind of complicated formwork. So I tried to use the terracotta as lost shuttering, building on the work that was already done by Laurie Baker, but increasing the effective depth by having deeper pots. So through this method, I was able to, first of all, I had started employing a lot more people in the building, and a bigger chunk of my budget used to go to the people, less to the materials, more to the labor, and local labor. So those were done those days intuitively, and not because I knew it's a good strategy, but then it kept growing, and I realized how important it is to think about what, even if if the budget is exactly the same, which one are you choosing? You know, if two things cost the same, I go for the one that's going to spend much more of its money on the people directly. So it's always a good thing. And so here, you know, you see what's involved, and you see how little steel is involved. You know, normally every 10 or 15 centimeters, there would be another steel bar, if not two. And in this case, every 45 or so. So that was the kind of saving that was involved. This is, of course, in this wall house, all these technologies were tested. But they were designed for the larger halls, and not having a beam at the edge, not having beams inside the hall, allows the hot air to escape. And there are many other, it's an integrated solution for many other concerns. So lots of big span structures were solved that way. And this one, for instance, is again a hand extruded system that goes together with a partly prefabricated concrete rib, and it's like a kind of insulated jack arch system that was also tested in the wall house. And there you see another rammed earth wall being tested as well. Because, you know, nobody would let you test on their projects. And I had to do all that research, you know, without the research funding. When I said research-oriented practice, it meant, where do you get the funds from? So all that was done on my own usually, and then applied. So then this is a workshop for technical skills. This is another housing project, 3-story high. And this is, again, the test of the ceiling in the wall house, the first prototype tested here for that housing project elsewhere. The rammed earth wall tested here to train, not only to test how it works, but to train all those people who are going to actually be able to go elsewhere and make those houses. Now, the thing is about this rammed earth is, again, it's not a traditional way of doing it. In fact, there's no rammed earth in that area because of the monsoon. This is a 5% cement stabilized rammed earth, and it looks like concrete. It has a very modern aesthetics. It's a monolithic piece that you can build one wall per day with 4 people. And people are more and more, as I went along, I try to choose technologies where people could participate in their construction and reduce costs if they wanted to. So that's how my architectural preferences developed. As I involved, I became more, people became more important in my projects. So this is that housing project. Here, in this one, we had, in all of these projects, actually, we are treating the wastewater, harvesting rainwater and all of that. In Auroville, a lot of projects already were very highly ecological, and there's a lot of prototypes for such things. These, again, the low-cost end. Here, sometimes, in very low-cost projects, I see, depending on exactly how much you can save, sometimes you have brick parapets with rammed earth walls because you don't have enough money to buy another formwork and so on. So now I'm going to explain the baked in situ mud house. So as I told you, it's about building a mud house and cooking the whole thing in situ. Ray Meeker, who developed this, who pioneered this whole technology and made it work, this is one of his tests. He used to build various kiln models to be able to find out what is efficient. And inside the house, that he would cook, he would actually fire various other terracotta products that are required in the houses, whether they are tiles, pipes, wash basins, WCs, and so on. So I found this to be a very, very interesting technology, because it's like if you take the fire to the building site, instead of taking the bricks to the industry for firing, I wanted to measure what kind of socio-economic differences come about. And that's why I did my PhD on that. And after finishing the PhD, I wanted to test one more structure for fuel efficiency and so on. And so that's why this orphanage project was made. And then you have students involved in this project, because, you know, I've always tried to share this immediately with the people, you know, through workshops and so on. And so here you see that what they're doing is that the students are stacking bricks, and we have to leave room for the oxygen to enter. So it's very complex, but the interesting advantage is that you literally buy no material, because except for the fuel, and depending on where you get it from, this is actually all clay, and everything is labor. It's almost 100% labor. There is, of course, the fuel. In this case, we used coal dust from factories, from when you sweep the floor from, you know, other furnaces, you get this kind of coal dust, and we mixed it into the brick. So the brick burnt out of its own fuel. So these are very, very difficult experiments. And then the house cooks for about 3 or 4 days. And the whole thing, you know, it has to reach 980 degrees centigrade. And then if everything went well, then you have those red bricks inside. And, you know, typical kilns, they waste 40% of the energy that they generate into their own walls again and again and again and again. So that's the heat that Ray Meeker wanted to tap, and then he solved all this complex kiln technologies. So, you know, I think this is I still hope that somebody will take it up and, you know, take it further, because I think it has a huge potential to deliver a brick house for the price of a mud house, and involving no cement, because the whole thing is cemented by fire. So, and then you produce. So, you know, the house becomes a producer of building materials, not a consumer of building materials. It just feeds the local economy with the products it generates. So, to wrap up the terracotta or the fired clay section, I'm going to show you images of what I did in Venice when David Chipperfield invited me to the Biennale 4 years ago. And because Venice is such a brick city, you see the different types of bricks that were patched, you know, different bricks from different times show the socio-economic changes in, you know, now you can't get bricks like these even. You have, in Venice, you have very different kind of bricks with which you have to do repairs. It's the hollow, kind of tall, big piece. So, you know, this was the space given to me in the Arsenale, and it was interesting because the brick that you saw was only revealed because of the fact that it's a building in ruins, but then there are terracotta tiles, and the whole city is about firing clay. So I decided to situate the wall house inside that, because the theme was common ground, and I wanted to show that we are more common than we are different, and that actually it's just in our perception, all this division and all of that. We are all the same across the planet. According to the geographical conditions, we are slightly different, and the cultural context. So this was, again, to strengthen the importance of architecture being a full-scale thing, to be experienced by inhabiting spaces with a full-scale body, and not, you know, because of the over-emphasis now on those renderings and whatever help us to write about architecture also without even visiting those places and all of that. So I wanted to discuss all those issues by building a full-scale project and show that only in full scale does everything that architecture involves get represented in the right balance. If not, it's either too much about material, too much about form, and all those things. So most of all, I wanted to show that the building that looked perfectly designed for South India could seamlessly belong to not only Venice, but to the Arsenale. And people couldn't tell between this and that. Even the roof, the terracotta roof and the one below with much less support, with no support. That shows that we have advanced. But even the arch and the vault, you see the same profile at the back is exactly the same catenary curve. So in this corner here on the left, there are pieces that I made in other materials to keep testing. This was all made with wine bottles since we were in Italy. We didn't drink all that. But it involved, again, a mix of people. It was relatively mostly made by students, the whole thing in 6 weeks. So people who came with us could learn the whole process of architecture from design to construction. Everything was designed in a manner that students would be able to do them. And then all the material came authentically from India because David had asked whether I wanted to do it outside in the garden because Alvaro Siza was the other person who architect who had done a house and it was located outside. And I knew that I told him, no, I want it in the inside because I want to exhibit this architecture in full scale. But I want to exhibit it and it would not make sense for Venice. So it was deliberately placed inside and lit as an exhibited piece. And there were craftsmen who came in from India. So we had all of these people together. The engineer was from Australia. I was in Australia at that time. So we had 20 students from there, 10 students from Italy, 6 Indian craftsmen. And we managed to build that together. So then I'm moving on to stone. So, one of the skills that are disappearing in India, but not only are they disappearing, it's also that this community doesn't have enough work because of social transition. So they used to there's a village in South India where they made grinding stones for grinding our chutneys and masalas. So now with the mixer that every villager has, since we have electricity, even though it's not at all reliable, nobody buys those grinding stones, but these people know how to level them perfectly flat by hand. And so I wanted to do a project with that, and I wanted to see whether through contemporary use of these skills, if these skills could go on one hand, on the other hand, we could, question some of the uses of stone we have now, because they all get factory polished and all that. All these hotel lobbies are made of polished granite, reflecting all the light from the ceiling. And, it's very, doesn't feel like stone anymore. So I wanted to use this, and this, what you see here, was made with the whole flooring, which was undulating, was made by hand leveling these stone slabs. And some of them are not leveled, and that's how there's a keystone and 2 pieces leaning against each other. So this was a contemporary store idea, but it was just a 2-week exhibition. And all these pieces, the brief was it was not about affordability at all. They told me to talk about luxury, because I had to make statements about luxury. And and in order not to contradict myself and to care for the social equity, I defined luxury as having more time than you need. That you can actually have the time to cook if it takes a whole day, make a sari weave a sari for 4 months, take time to do things well and to do things yourself. That is luxury, to have more time than you need, to have more space than you need. So that's a common definition. Everybody can agree to it. The poor, the rich, everybody wants more time than they have. So the good thing about this was it was spoken about a lot, because they said, why are you taking all this trouble for just 2 weeks? And I realized that the most of the waste produced is in exhibitions, because they do things with tacky materials and with wood in a way that you can't reuse them and so on. And this was a modular system, and it was just in the dry gravel standing in that bed of other little chips of granite. And when you finished, you just took everything away, and we gave it to other people or sold it or whatever. So there was no waste at all. And Why shouldn't a thing take time to make if it is just for 2 weeks? Why? Because if there was a big budget, and that budget went to those craftsmen, you know. So we decided that, but again, it was important. This store was called Made in India, curated by people in Milan. It was it's a part of a series going to take place in many countries. The idea is that if the luxury sector affords to pay those craftsmen well, not just somehow, you know, that's the only way those skills will continue. That was the message to be given. So all the products you see are handmade, and they had to be contemporary. So I wanted to set it in a space that is contemporary, and you know, so on. But similarly, also a lot of other houses that you know, with random stone masonry, that you find more and more, like you find areas with a lot of stone, but people say that they don't want to do it because people have forgotten how to work with non-standard material. So I'm working with stone in various forms, but I haven't got too many examples there because I really want to talk a bit more about urban waste. It's a growing, unending section. I just started with one thing and another thing, and I just see more and more opportunities for building with urban waste. You know, in the orphanage I showed you, there was already there that I began the urban waste thing by using bicycle wheels, by using, you know, some of them might be here. So it's funny that I show books here, but I discovered that books is actually one of the biggest urban waste areas that nobody talks about because people feel very shocked and people are in denial about the fact that books are burnt regularly. Libraries, it's very expensive to store books. So on one hand, people have smaller attention span and are reading less, but on the other hand, overprinting. I don't know what it is, but there's a lot of books that in Australia, where this picture is, it's mostly pulped. In Spain, it's burnt, and so on. It's incredible how much there is to do with books. The reason I began inquiring this, researching books, was because I was invited to Barcelona to build a pavilion expressing liberty. And I thought of talking about the idea of knowledge making you free, because there Catalonia wants to be independent, and I didn't want to go in the political way. So I wanted to focus on knowledge again. And I found out, I thought it would be nice if it's built with books, because if people are not reading, like, let it haunt them, you know. So I had IAC as my partner, who mostly do a lot of robotic, digital kind of inquiries, but even they do their prototypes by hand, and a lot of things cannot be done if students didn't work on those actual models with real materials and so on. So it was a good partner for us, and we did a couple of workshops, you know, and found out we had to demystify what a book is and look at it just as an object and just do things with it. It was very, very difficult for me to build with books, the idea of building with books, because everybody starts reading them, and only now when it's not supposed to be read. So, you know, we tried all these things. Very interesting. If you fold alternate pages, it's just not going to fall. There's no glue or anything. We discovered a lot of things like that. So there was another exhibition at that time in Madrid where I was questioning the library, the future of the library in the city, to know what happens when people don't read books or go to libraries for exchanging books. What should the house of knowledge be, or how, you know. So there was a design project, design studio, 2-week workshop in the exhibition space, and I wanted them always I want them to do something in full scale. So I told them that imagine in this utopian imaginary country, there's nothing but what is in the basement, and they had books, of course. They have old catalogs which they don't need. So everything we did here, everything they made, all the models, everything was only using books. So, and they had to make one full-scale thing. This is just one of the examples of what they did that was also exhibited, is this is a sofa by just using the movable thing in the vertical face. So it's not a rigid element, but if you use it as a seat, it's the hardest thing. So, it's just like this, made like this, bunches of pages folded. All of this happens only when you start. That's what I mean to say, that if students can't work with their hands, if they cannot think with their hands, they exclude a whole area of imagination. Very important, because if you were just to design, you would only draw what you already experienced. You would never have a new experience. So for me, it's very important that in a design school, the imagination has to be developed as much as knowledge and skills. All the three have to be developed. So these kind of, like urban waste is a very good thing, because they're so surprised that they look at it in a new way than if you would give them a brick, for example. So what I did is, for the actual pavilion in Barcelona, by then I had been seeing this plastic a lot. Probably it influenced me because of the ham that they keep serving, those vacuum-packed Iberico, jamón, serrano, and all of that. So I realized that, I wanted to also make an artistic statement that to extend the life of the book like the ham, to vacuum pack it, also to make it rigid, and to forcibly open it, to show that the books are not being read. And then we made a canopy out of it. And then this canopy was, there aren't enough shaded spaces in all of these squares. So this is the Filmoteca in the Raval district where we did this. Also, all these trees are cut to make books. So if you're not reading, make the trees back, So that was a bit the idea. And this is one project that, I always try that you don't detect the material, because it has to go beyond its recognizing it, then it's successful. This is another example with TETRAPACK. TETRAPACK is a very complex thing to dismantle, because it has 4 layers that are different materials. It's a very complicated thing. So when people want to recycle it, they just use many more chemicals and just press it together and make boards. And so what I've done here is I thought that it's such a complex material made to be waterproof, so why not fill it back with water or sand and just use it as a brick. So with this, we did a project in Mexico City. It was a workshop, 2-day workshop, and that's what we produced. We took a Eladio Dieste type of wall so that it'll be structurally stable. So students get a chance to work with the real weight of the brick, even if it's something else than a brick. Like in this case, it was for the Hay Festival in Segovia. And here, these water bottles, actually you can see that they have got the individual water bubbles, so you can also measure the levels with it. But this was for distributing water because of climate change and discussions about the importance of clean water reaching people. So with the water that would have to be stacked, we did an installation so that by the end of it, we could just have nothing left there after the opening. So this is the bicycle wheels used as formwork in the orphanage that I showed you, the fired house, and bottles, glasses. Sometimes if you buy materials from the domestic sector, they are much more reasonable than from the material manufacturers, because you could not have bought with this project those, because they are made in a certain way that it becomes so expensive. So I buy materials from any sector, I don't immediately go to the material catalog. And now the next project I'm going to do, which is not yet, the workshop is going to be in Ahmedabad for Archie-Prix. It's an international student competition that they have. And I'm going to look at textile manufacturers' waste. And so we are going to look at tensile structures and other things that can be made with fabric. And finally, the last thing is FERROCEMENT. It's a material I've been working on in order to, like I said, use significantly less materials. So it's different from reinforced cement concrete in the sense that it uses chicken mesh instead of large diameter steel. And the whole FERROCEMENT element must not be more than 1 inch. It can be less. The moment it becomes thicker than that, it'll have the bending stresses, etc. And then it'll need to become, it'll start behaving like reinforced concrete, and then the self-weight of the structure will be more than, so that cycle that happens, with reinforced concrete. So FERROCEMENT is a material that Fry Auto used a lot, developed forms for, but Nervi promoted in the 40s. And for some reason it has not, I think the potential is not really exploited. So I've been always working with FERROCEMENT. But one of the projects I'm going to show you is looking at crease patterns developed in origami structures and looking at how that could lead to not only rigid forms, because FERROCEMENT has to, the form gives it strength. So it's very interesting for architects to, try to, whenever the span is not, if it's not standing, you just have to introduce more folds. So it's very interesting for the form generation aspect, but also I felt that I would be able to look at the formwork and use recycled cartons, have forms that completely collapse, maybe for disaster relief or other uses. You can just go and open the thing, have your FERROCEMENT arriving with those creases, and see with very little steel, you can have structures like that. So these are projects which are not really in the mainstream, but they've been tested in full scale. And I'm very interested in working with FERROCEMENT as an affordable housing solution. In many contexts, it's relevant. Here, for instance, I'm exploring how prefab elements can be made in FERROCEMENT. The previous one was about whole surfaces where you don't need walls and roofs and separate elements, but light elements which hardly need a foundation. This one is, the idea is to do a prefab system, modular system, where all your belongings fit into the folds that you need to make. And the house can be assembled in 4 or 5 days, and can be not, these are not conceived as factory-made elements, but made in the houses of villagers, village masons, who have always the opportunity to make a little extra money in the weekends, etc., and teach people around them at the same time. So that's, it's something that I'm hoping to, to really take onto the mainstream, because I'm astonished at how affordable this can be and how quickly houses could be delivered. So this house was first tested in Chennai as a prototype, and we used all these colors to highlight the voids that are actually storage spaces. You don't need anything here, doors, windows, everything's made out of FERROCEMENT. Kitchens are incorporated, bathroom, toilet bowls, wash basins, everything's incorporated. The colors are like stucco, also embedded. You'll not have to paint anything. And all of this has been developed as a very simple solution. This is the separate toilet that goes with that. And then there's also the built-in version. This was exhibited in London in Roca recently. In fact, it's in Zaha Hadid's space. The day before Zaha passed away, in fact, was the opening. And then the same project that I've, the modular house and the toilet is what I brought to this year's Biennale. And after showing this, I'll end with that. The topic was reporting from the front. I decided to discuss the battle theme idea that Alejandro had introduced by saying reporting from the front, and the fact that it's a battle now for a better living environment. I wanted to address the issue of battle itself, because I feel that the duality happens when you don't integrate them. And I think architects are very good at synthesizing everything. And I think the duality, all these opposites, have to be brought together to avoid the battle and to enrich the process and the product. So on what I did is I put the main objects, the house and the toilet, but on the other side, and the straight axis, you walk through the house and you go out of, you walk through the house and you go alongside the same, those who know the Arsenale space will understand. So I placed the duality that exists in architecture, the spatial research on one side through models, and the material research on the other side. Usually people talk about one or another aspect, but don't realize that the architecture is in the designing the void, and the material is only there to hold it and shape it. And therefore, it doesn't matter with what material, one should not have fetishes about that. One should use materials that make sense and focus on the space to define what kind of architecture you want to have, because that's the part that the people are going to use. So I arranged this that way. And there was a lot of space around to search, look at things, although Venice is not quite the right place because there's so much to see. It's like a trade fair. I still used this as an opportunity for me to do all this work and sort out my archives and put the inventory together. So that's why I'm very happy to present it and explain it, because I'm not sure there how many people would have actually seen all the things that are here. There's one object, one installation here called Live Knowledge, where all these hashtags were introduced and live tweets every 30 seconds about housing and affordability and so on appear. So you can sit on those benches and, you know, dwell on all the issues that I'm concerned about, and I can myself sit there and listen to the voices. So here you see the wash basin and everything. The whole thing has been recreated exactly in full scale so that people can actually, because seeing is believing. When they see the quality of space, then they believe that, you know, this could work. So here you see all these different themes I spoke about. There's a lot of research on colors, on pigments, on cements, all types of cements, high-tech and low-tech. There are 3 patches in the ferrocement where there are 6 original ferrocement pieces made in Germany. And, you know, the opportunity of the exhibition was used to push the knowledge further. So that's what I want to say, that every project is an opportunity to build more knowledge. And what we did here is we worked with TU Berlin, with Mike Schleich and Arndt Goldak, and we looked at whether glass fiber, carbon fiber, jute, and all of these other materials could improve the strength in ferrocement and test all the different properties. Here you see even the culture of building was addressed, because these are trowels, the Indian trowels and the German one. You know, obviously, which one is which. For making the same right angle. So the craftspeople from India went to Germany, built, see this is what all happens in the process that one does an exhibit. The process is that there's a knowledge exchange, and all those elements that are made naturally by the Indians in their own, you know, way of doing it is then tested, and they were so surprised to see the strength. Look at the way it doesn't break. It's so ductile. And so now this is going to become you know, the research has gained a lot from this. So it was not just a mere production of an exhibition. We have actually taken the knowledge further. The rest of the elements in this prototype were built by recycling the previous Art Biennale's wood from the German pavilion. So first, I've looked at, the moment I was invited, what kind of waste people are going to produce, and then choose the one appropriate. And then with another organization, I've been looking at what kind of homeless peoples and what kind of needs they have, etc., with an organization that helps them. And with Re Biennale, the people who are going to recycle with us now, on the 27th, we are going to dismantle this. I'm going to Venice, we're going to dismantle this, take more students with us, do a workshop there on reassembling this elsewhere, so that whatever we produce is useful on many, many levels. So everybody, like there have been 3 batches of workshops in the production of it, but, you know, in Germany, the engineers were involved. Here, the people who are, you know, getting more socially sensitive, etc. And of course, Madrid students went there to construct it. So with this, I would like to conclude that with my sketch that I gave Aravena before he gave me that spot, to show that the projects that you see are the fruits of the tree, but the knowledge, the quest for knowledge is actually what results in that kind of projects. And I wanted to display all this as an inventory, and it gave me the opportunity to explain that even it's always worth investing in knowledge, Because if you have the knowledge, like if the roots are fine, even if the tree collapses in a storm, it will definitely survive. Whereas if you just work on the superficial level and things change, you don't know how to reinvent yourself continuously. So it's better to invest in, we are really living in times where we need a lot more knowledge to divert, you know, to move in a more healthy direction. And I think even the battles that he talks about can only be solved even if the knowledge way takes much more time. It took me 25 years to do all of this, so it's still worth it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was just totally fascinating and a really great kind of introduction to your work, and also I think kind of introduction to a different way of thinking and approaching and a different set of circumstances and environments in the broad sense of the word. We're going to have a brief discussion. I invite you to sit over here. We'll just very briefly, because I know that students are getting antsy with Thanksgiving around the corner, but we'll also give you a chance to ask a few questions. So, I don't know, these on? Okay. So I am going to ask you, so what is vernacular? But first, I'm very interested in what you said about architecture as an instrument, and this idea that you share the knowledge that you've gained with a very wide variety of people. Can you speak a little bit about how, on the one hand, you sort of ended with a fairly sophisticated test of tensile strength in the ferrocement, and one could imagine that with the connections that Schley has, that there could be all sorts of commercial products that might result from that. So that's one kind of side that I think is a more direct, understandable line from an academic research point of view and what you do in your workshops. When you work with more local people, how do you, what would you like to see happen with what it is that you discover working with them? Because it's a mutual discovery, isn't it? I mean, you redeploy their skills, their, you know, their, not necessarily heritage, but like the way that you kind of reinvent what it is, the artifacts that they produce. Is it possible that, you know, without the guidance of the architect leading it, that you leave them with something that they can then bring to their community or develop in a kind of, I don't know if it's in an entrepreneurial way, or how do you sort of see that knowledge?
Think, first of all, the thing that most concerns me is that even what they know could be lost in no time. So the first thing is to encourage them and value, because I know that what they know how to do, just like when we know how to stitch a button or knit, and I therefore don't mean only craftsmen. I mean in general, the fact that we knew how to make things, or when you see the kind of smoking embroidery that people were able to do, every grandmother knew how to do all of that. That's all mathematical, and that's a lot of knowledge in there, and it was developed over generations. So to lose that just like that, you know, is really worrying. Secondly, my second worry is that architects do not know about those things because they get often formed, they get so disconnected from those realities. Many of them living in very urban areas don't get to see what range of skills there actually are. And because they get used to consuming products that are all made differently. So what happens is that they undervalue those things. And so what happens is when architects give them instructions, and that's what I saw in rural areas, the craftsman feels very small. He feels like the architect feels that it's always the fault of the craftsman who was not able to make it. And many times it is because the architect doesn't know how to convey, he doesn't know. There are shortcomings on both sides. But often being guided by architects who are not aware of this as an equal capacity as theirs, I think what happens is there has been a great degradation of the skills. People are not necessarily doing good work all the time and also not being guided well enough. So all of this has to be preserved, first of all. But I think, unfortunately, because they are also badly paid and they are on a different social level, this is another thing that concerns me. So I think more than, I'm not attached to, like for instance, in the case of the potters, I'm not attached to the pot. I don't mind if it goes extinct at all. I'm not a nostalgic type of person. But I'm worried about the potter, how he's going to survive. And about our society, if we've forgotten how to ever stitch a button, nobody knows anymore how to do it, what is the difference that makes to our mind? That's something that I
But is there
about.
I mean, the risk is that when you finish a project, that it can't, the knowledge that's gained can't be propagated. Does it happen in the situations that you're working in that the knowledge gained somehow can then go to be carried by the craftsmen? Do they,
It does get propagated, actually. I think it always does get propagated. I think even if one child learns to stitch one button, then he'll be able to stitch all those other buttons, because he'll just first of all know that it can be done. So what happens is, it may not go elsewhere geographically if those craftsmen don't move, or I don't move, or other people are doing the same thing in their own way too. But it matters for that place. So in that place, those people, I mean, they're all getting better paid. They are in demand. Everybody wants to hire them.
Well, that's what I mean. Like that. So you've kind of raised the bar, so to speak.
I wouldn't take the credit alone. I think I wouldn't really, because it's really, I don't think so. I think maybe they would do something else, and but I mean, I feel I gain from the fact that the things I value go on longer. And I think see, the fact that people are appreciating this and that you've invited me here, and there's a kind of, a lot of people are looking for this kind of thing today, but I was looking for it many years ago. So what I mean is that it is still satisfying, because when if you know that the habitual way of doing things is not good enough, it's impossible to do it that way. Some people can still take up jobs that they don't believe in, but I think then it's not like living anymore, I think in any case, I wouldn't take all the credit, but I do think that people like well-made things.
Well, I think it's interesting the trajectory that you took your lecture through, and ending on the Venice Biennale and on sophisticated, collaboration with a sophisticated engineering company in Berlin, because it's sort of, I was questioning at first, like, how do you apply some of this knowledge that you've learned? How do you teach the students in Madrid? Is it about them going to work in other parts of the world, or are you asking them to interrogate their own environment, their own ways of making? And the sort of application of the technology that you were, encountered because of very different circumstances in India somehow are still relevant in Europe, having to do with waste, having to do with embodied energy, and all of those issues.
I think what is important is not the exact questions I asked. It's important to ask questions, and it's important to be convinced about what one is doing. And I think if the right questions are asked, then the student projects become more authentic. And so I don't want to teach in a manner of I don't want them to be like me, obviously. I think teaching has come about because I think that learning has been happening, in my environment, in all of this, on the site, in wherever, whether it was in Venice, there's a lot of learning happening, and that's attractive. So it attracts academia, to that. And I think what is important is, like what you mentioned, the high-tech aspect in Berlin. The problem is that if a lot of the affordability problem has to do with the fact that all the materials that are in the norms and standardized all of that process happened after industrialization, and only those kind of things have been sanctioned. So if you try to do something that existed, this happened only for the last 100 years or less. Before that, everything else was locally, like people knew their clays, they knew their, Today, it's, people are hiding behind the norms. But the fact is, people who would go and work with a clay that they don't know the difference between this clay and that, they would be very insecure to do that. So they are basically hiding the fact that they don't know how to do it, and therefore they're afraid. But they say, no, this is not allowed and that's not allowed. The fact is, why is Mike Schleich able to calculate this ferrocement, which is the most complex thing, is because he knows. And those who are not ready to do it, because they don't know. It's as simple as that for me. So if I've always wanted all of those things to get tested. There are very few people who are working on that, but I think we really need to, in our times, we know less than in our parents and much less than our grandparents. So that is not development. So obviously in academia, at least, we should ensure that we continue to know. Like people used to draw better, calculate better, everything better. Sorry, I don't take it personal. But I know that why in the same number of years, people were considered to be adults when they were 21 years. They had profession. I started my office at 23. So why do we have this insecurity that I still don't know, I still don't have to keep learning, I have to keep, and yes, we have to keep learning, but keep learning through life. We must always, if you keep doing the learning in the university, doesn't mean you have to disconnect from the reality. You can still contribute. So I hope that, ideally, I would like all the research to happen in the academic environment, because that's the best conditions we have. And why should we not do actual projects? There's so many real problems in the world. Why do we need to do frivolous, things that just, because it has to look different? And there's so many, like Charles and Ray Eames said, there's so many real problems to be solved. So I think...
But also I think, to further extend what you're saying, I think it's very interesting that you admit in your first project you didn't know what you were doing. And I think like the idea that we have to be experts and we have to have everything figured out before we begin something, and to, in many contexts the risk is severe because it's somebody else's money, it's your liability, it's your reputation. But I think that there are many, many opportunities that we can take risks, and at the very least, I think in circumstances when you're doing installation work, and that's why, as students, I think it's a great opportunity when you're in school, but also when you're out of school, is to take on those opportunities to make proposals for PS1 talk about bricks and experimentation with David Benjamin. But I think that that's not the only time, and that we can continue to, looking at Ada and GSAPP, how to continue experimenting in work. Yeah.
I don't mean to sound critical of academia at all. What I mean is I have moved into academia more formally because I believe in it more than anything else, because I think it's important to take the time to think. And in the real practice, not everybody takes the time and does the thinking, because sometimes you don't have, I had already started that way. So for me, I've got already a certain, environment around me in my practice. But I know that, so I just try to bring this quality to students, and whether they're in the first year, third year, whatever, it doesn't matter. When you're on the site, you realize everybody has to learn something at their own level, and together, everybody's at a different level. Each human being has a different thing, and that's the richness. There's no need even to standardize that learning process. I think what is important is the curiosity and the clarity of the question, and then you can answer it. And that's why I've been striving to come up to, I always wanted to work with Mike Schleich. Now look, the reason to do the Venice project that way was because I really value resources, including money and time. I didn't want the money of the Biennale, which is a lot of money. First of all, they don't even give it to you. You have to fundraise it and whatever. And then with that money, where would I invest money? Always in knowledge. So I want to involve, and now I can afford to work through this context. I can work with them as collaborators. I would not have been able to pay that project, And so all of this that we did, whatever we spent, if you count how many people learned things out of it, it was enormous. And it's not, was that 100 and something thousand that we spent in Venice worth it for an exhibition? In my opinion, I don't think so. But for all that we are doing on the side, absolutely. And that's why I wanted to exhibit the thing that I'm going to spend so much time doing and whatever. It should have many more layers of meaning.
Well, it's going to have many more lives, so it's not just one exhibition, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe I'll open it up to the audience if anybody has any questions.
Yes, thank you very much for... Hello.
We can hear you.
Okay, so thank you very much for your presentation. I'm a visiting scholar here from Brazil, and I'm also working on research on FERROCEMENT. There's an architect there called Lele that worked a lot with FERROCEMENT. But there's a great difference, which is that he would work with great factories, and he would try to scale his production on, even though it was very much publicly related and socially related. But the thing is, I would like to ask is, how would you see the experiences that you are starting locally and with local people and local houses, maybe going to scale into a more broad production, let's say?
You know, the kind of scale you talked about, that is the easy thing. If I have a big commission, if the funds are there, go to Mike Schleich, go to the big companies, that's the easy part. I'm not researching FERROCEMENT only for its own sake, you know. I'm trying to, for years, looking at how people could empower themselves to contribute towards their own housing in order to make it significantly cheaper and faster, significantly faster. If you can get a house assembled in a week, you'll not have to worry about inflation. You don't have to have the tiring thing. You know, so I mean, the reason I'm working with it that way is because I want to actually, all of these technologies that I'm working with are keeping the people in mind. It's not like plugging the people in afterwards into the process. And that's why they are there in that, you know, I'm trying to see, that's why this prototype thing has been a big work for me, because I'm trying to see how could people be able to make their own, what kind of FERROCEMENT can you allow them to make that is safe? What size can they carry? They're literally designed so that 4 people could carry the piece and, you know, transport it instead of, you know, it could go with a cow cart even or whatever. So that's why these designs look the way they do.
So it seems a lot of your work focuses on protection of intangible heritage, like the skill set of the individual. And it tends to lend itself to cost, right? It's cheaper in a lot of ways to use local materials and local workers. What happens when that doesn't align? Do you put the concerns of the client first because it's cheaper to use non-local materials or non-local workers?
I never put the concerns of the client first. Don't tell them.
Okay. So that was my question.
No, the thing is that, you know, the reason why I've done the kind of projects I've done is also because if the client and my values coincide, then I've done them. But if they have not, you know, then we've argued or we've discussed, you know. But if I don't agree, like if the client wants me to cut costs on certain areas, like social equity and all that, I would not do the project. So I haven't done those projects. I have a lot of things you don't see are the ones I didn't get the job or I didn't agree or whatever, you know. So, you know what I mean? Like, you know, there are things, it's not me just wanting to romantically preserve the craftsman thing, you know. It's just that I came to the artisan aspect. First, I began with my environmental concern because we just cannot go on the way we are going on. You know, so there are things that some people would ask me to do, I wouldn't do them. I would explain. I think basically everybody's reasonable, and if you explain and find a way, so that if it doesn't look just religious, but you find a way to talk reason, it usually goes further. Next comes the technologies you have to choose. And then of course, which client will want to purposely spend extra money? So they will care about cost-efficient solutions. So there's no reason why they wouldn't go on with us normally. And so, but I haven't been just interested in finding projects to run my office. If that's the case, I have not been doing those projects. I'm doing projects where I would be meaningfully engaged and where my intelligence can be involved and not just to feed my office, you know, in terms. So a lot of projects are sometimes that way.
Absolutely.
But for me, the biggest resource is my own life and my own time. Yeah. And that's the one I first want to conserve. I don't want to do things where, you know.
Yeah, but not in the sense of like a capitalist sense, right? Not for your benefit, but for the client trying to extend their money as far as they can. Like if a decision needs to be made, do we protect the intangible heritage or do we use another source? You know, what is the moral structure there?
No, I don't think there's any moral structure. It'll always, you just negotiate and it'll always be a reasonable thing because I'm an open-minded person. The client will also be so. We'll discuss and we'll decide which compromise would compromise you never want to compromise a higher value for a lower one. So architects are always doing this sort of negotiation, and I think nothing is imposed religiously into these processes. In the Venice Biennale, I've focused on these issues, and those are the ones I'm, you know, mostly showing here. But I wouldn't take up, you know, out of context and impose, you know, artisans from somewhere and look for, you know, no, not necessary. But it's very contextual.
Kate?
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the implications of your methodology for practice on drawing and how that, you know, is able to be either represented or not in a shareable set of documents. Because it seems to me, there's a question earlier about kind of scaling the work, and it seems to me that the ability to draw or how you draw and how you communicate with the artist is about material of architecture.
Yeah, I think it's pretty very conventionally, I would say. Sorry for the banal answer. Yeah, I mean,
So for example, the pots on the arc,
yeah,
literally
yeah, there is a drawing. I mean, I came from a school where there was a very good tradition of very good technical drawing as well as artistic drawings, watercolors, all of that. So, you know, I believe a lot in drawing being the communication medium of the architect. However, the thing that I had to change is the dimensioning, because when you work, people tend to dimension those dimension chains from both ends, and you'll never know where to adjust the error, this side or that. So definitely I really am impatient when people they think that you can get away without drawing everything. I'm not that way. I really feel everything has to be thought out and drawn out perfectly. But the dimensioning, because when you work with non-standard materials, that has to be, again, it's the knowledge of drawing and dimensioning. Yes, but that came to my rescue, in fact. The fact that if you learn to draw well, you know how to dimension, that nobody will make an error on the site. You know how the product has to be adjusted according to what, etc. So I think it's the drawings that save all this experimentation, you know, every little joint. And yes, definitely, because we are not aiming to, we are aiming to have the least, you know, errors accumulating and all of that. But it's true that most people feel like you can directly, the reason I do those one-to-one things are rather for testing and predicting those areas that you cannot tell. Like, for example, in a vault, because there'll be different degrees to which you can insert one pot in the other, and you may or may not fit the same number in each row. You may have to cut a pot or whatever. So I have to plan that into the way that my standard section will be interpreted with a note and so on. And definitely, it's thanks to my very classical education, I was able to take care of all that, yeah.
Any other questions? Nope. Okay, 2 more and then we'll call it a night.
Hi, thank you very much for your lecture. It was great.
My question is more about, it's not a question, I was just wondering what your opinion is about, for instance, like I'm very recently actually exposed to all like very, very new digital techniques, and I'm absolutely fascinated by it, and some of which I wasn't familiar with at all. I studied in India for my undergraduation. And
Where?
In Pune. And I visited Auroville and like saw all your structures. But I was wondering, now it's almost taking a step back in a saying, so I wouldn't put you, it's almost like the whole vernacular debate that you were wondering about, but it's like these two almost very distinct things, whether it's like building with natural material and local material, or say 3D printing stuff and like choosing from a palette that's universal to, build fast and manufacture things for housing and like, easing solutions everywhere. But then this technology about using local materials to build faster and like using building technology by like truth to the material which is really important to understand the material. So I wanted to know, because if you understand from this palette of things that you can 3D print from, and now I think the palette's growing day by day. So I was wondering what your opinion was of that technology.
You're asking me whether I like digital technologies or hate them?
No, not if you like or hate them, but whether there will be because now that palette's increasing as well. Like, things that you can easily build
I believe, and again, thanks to my Indian background, probably, I believe in coexistence. I think the people very easily think that if something happens, the other thing has to be completely outdated. And this is something I've also experienced in the developed countries more. But in India, the cow cart continues to go beside all the fancy cars. Things don't. People wear modern clothes. They don't give up the saris and they don't give up their jewelry. And so I don't believe in just because there's a new technology that comes out. I never feel that therefore let's just throw the baby with the bathwater. It's not something I automatically think. So I'm also as excited about all those possibilities. I've worked with IAC as well. Because I'm not obsessed, or for me I'm not obsessed with all that either. I would like to use what is relevant. I wouldn't think that now I have to only think in those terms, Even if I don't have a computer, I would be fine. I mean, I'm using it because socially this is how we are in this, but it's not like we had gone to, there was a panel discussion where I was surprised where Wolf Prix had mentioned, we were together on a panel in Sydney, and he talked about, without computers, a lot of the things they do would not be possible. And I can't think that way, I understand where he's coming from. But for me, whatever I want to do would be possible because it's we who made the computer. If I need it for something, but I cannot be not able to function anymore if there's a power cut. I am not ready to accept that. Because I know that, look, I know how to calculate. Maybe that systems, certain things become very automated. And yes, those are the places where this robotic thing should be diverted. I don't want to see a situation where the machines are intelligent and we are robotic. This is not what I'm, looking at. I just feel like I'll be the intelligent one. I'll use the robot where I want, not the other way around, And I think there's definitely, research is good and it's good to develop all of that. But I think too easily we are giving up other things without knowing whether we can manage without them. That's the thing. I think there's, even without rationalizing it, I just like to knit. So I don't need to justify. If I want to knit, I'll buy ready-mades whenever I want, and if I want to knit, I'll knit, But the fact that I know how to knit is allowing me to do a fabric installation now in the next couple of months, because there's a lot of mathematics involved, a lot of knowledge involved. You never know where what you know can be useful elsewhere. So I just don't like the idea of being passive in the face of all those technologies. If you are awake and conscious, of course, it's great, all the advances.
One more question.
Thank you for your lecture. I was very interested in, you mentioned the intelligence of the hand, and having read Recherche and just growing up using my hands, I'm very interested
See, what I really feel sad about often is when some of my students are not able to express themselves because they're still learning AutoCAD and whatever, and they're not, they don't believe in their capacity to convey the idea simply with it, by drawing it, and then keep doing the AutoCAD and check out whatever they want. So I feel like I don't mind. I tell them, look, you can use whatever. For me, like, I'll never insist on this or that. If the quality of the drawing that is, that is shown to me, and if they cannot convey themselves through whichever medium, they are not good enough at it. They are limited sometimes in digital development. They are sometimes limited by the designer of that software and whatever else. And they don't trust themselves to just say, okay, if this is not working out, I'm just going to do it myself. They think that it's all become so standardized that even if you ask somebody for, my son was 4 years old and he said, Mommy, can you give me an A4? He wasn't even asking for a paper. So that's how it has become now. Somebody invented the common format printer. So there are many advantages of the fact that everything is A4. But to, it gets so deeply ingrained, I think the important thing is to just realize that all of these are there for improving our lives and getting what we want, and not that we are enslaved by them. If that awareness is there, you would use whatever will get you further and at the highest quality.
Okay, I think we'll let you have a drink and some dinner.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you all for this discussion.
Thank you. That was great. It was so interesting.